Little Nightmares is a critically acclaimed game series from Tarsier Studios. They made the first 2 games and then handed off the reins to Supermassive Games, the creators behind the Quarry and the Dark Picture anthology, to develop the 3rd entry, while Tarsier focused on their new game Reanimal. While the first 2 Little Nightmares sit at very positive on Steam, the 3rd one was heavily criticized with mixed reviews. Reanimal, on the other hand, also sits at very positive. So, what went wrong with the 3rd one?
Welcome back to Moose Tank and the antler antics of discussing game dev topics with me, Tess, and Victor. We'll be using our combined brain strength to analyze the games created by Tarsier Studios and their outsourcing of Little Nightmares 3 to Supermassive Games. This video will contain spoilers about the entire Little Nightmares game series and the recent release of Reanimal from Tarsier Studios. We will also be focusing solely on the main games and not talk about any DLCs, comic books, or podcasts that revolve around the lore of these games. Disclaimer: these are horror games with depictions of violence, self-harm, blood, and weird creatures.
To better understand the emotional dissonance between the games, I'd like to talk about comparing the game intros and the impact of visual storytelling. In the first Little Nightmares, you wake up as 6 in a lone suitcase and the scenery is swaying. The color grading is blue and sad and the lighting is dark. Visually, we understand that we are alone and possibly on a boat because of the swaying. The next rooms reinforce our perception of the environment. Big chains appear like those on huge ships. We're still alone with no one else around. Portals on doors and cabin beds hint at someone else occupying the space. We also learn that we are not strong, since tiny slugs easily overcome you in the dark. The janitor appears next, dragging a cage with the visuals leading us to a barred kids room. The setup for the enemy is done. This janitor keeps kids behind bars and you are the same size, meaning you are a probable target. In its simplicity, it has the intended effect of scaring you. It's easy to visually register and comprehend.
The intro to Little Nightmares 2 follows the same build-up. Mono wakes up next to a TV that shuts off, a hint of him being able to use it for travel, even though this is only relevant for replaying the game. But he's alone in the woods, with technology around him. The TV that switched off is our only hint at something supernatural, and our only lead forward. We see a decaying corpse and a cage signifying death and being trapped. Next is the combination of dead people in a trap hung from a tree. There's danger in the forest. We go through puzzles involving traps from nets and metal bear traps snapping shut on you, increasing in amounts before the reveal of the hunter's cabin. For a setup to work, there also needs to be a reward. In addition to the cabin, we've just learned that we can't jump great distances alone. We need help. And that's where the payoff happens. We find a friend, 6, but we have to navigate the hunter and his cabin to liberate her. The following chase sequence reinforces that the traps are warning of the hunter being close. The visuals are concise and keep the suspense and fear.
The intro to Little Nightmares 3 already differs from the formula of emotional setup for the character and the environment. Lo wakes up to find that he's not by himself. You see a friend named Alone and consults what appears to be a map, since you look around trying to navigate a new environment. There's suitcases, a broken mirror, portholes and sand. We're probably on the mall. There's indications of empty fishing nets, suggesting a drought in the desert. Our first hint of a bad guy is the weirdly placed pacifier and a person turned to stone. There are also a lot of crows, both dead and alive, feathers and hanging bodies. The intention is hard to place with the clues in front of us. The crows are intentionally framed as something of visual interest without emotional weight. Are they observing you? But we can also shoot them without repercussions? Are the bodies for the baby who's wandering around and grabbing crows? Simplicity at its core may seem just that, simple. Place a couple of scary things together and it's supposed to be frightening. Decaying bodies, scary. Giant old baby, creepy. Stone people, danger. Crows, bad omen. But without connecting the dots between the clues, it all ends up feeling disconnected. Low and Alone are also together from the beginning, with weapons, creating an imbalance and having a disadvantage to build the story on.
The intro in Reanimal offers a newer version of Tarsier's formula for visual storytelling. You're greeted by 4 kids looking down into a well, and then a 5th kid appears before you wake up as the boy on a small boat in the middle of the ocean. You are guided by buoys burning a warm red light signaling danger. You soon after find the girl drifting in the water. You pull her up and try to wake her. When she does, her first instinct is rage, and she attacks the boy but soon calms down. After following the buoys, you finally reach land. You've passed grottos, mines in the water, and dark unlit woods. The visuals are signaling danger and vast expanses of dark exploration. Reaching the island, you are introduced to a bunch of floppy skin people. They come to life, crawling like messed up snakes after the children. There's also a strange man who can teleport by, well, crawling inside bloated bodies.
That's
Nah.
fucking nasty, man.
Hell nah.
Jesus.
Nightmare fuel. Early in the intro, you find another one of your friends who is resigned to his fate of being on this strange island. You're compelled to gather your friends from this strange place you've appeared in.
Let's focus on 2 of the games and compare the stories of Reanimal and Little Nightmares 3. Major spoilers ahead. Reanimal definitely feels like a spiritual successor to Little Nightmares, more so than the actual sequel. It's clear that Tarsier understands the formula in a way that Supermassive does not. With more focus on creative puzzles and interesting world building, that doesn't necessarily make sense through the lens of the real world, but very much so through the lens of their world. The island where Reanimal takes place is war-torn and almost seems to be a warped version of the actual world these kids live in. There are coffins that you can find throughout the island that when opened reveals the fate of the 5 kids. The white dress on the girl and the rabbit mask is symbolic of sacrifice, but visually it's also easy to spot her in the environment. Like Six's yellow raincoat, she is important to the story, while the boy is less noticeable. He's part of a whole community, which later reveals itself to be a cult. Tarsier is also very good at giving out clues for the endgame, even from the start. When you reach the orphanage, you discover rabbit shrines and a hierarchy of bullies and a king ruling them.
Side tangent. The king made me reminiscent of the plot to the book Lord of the Flies by William Golding. I loved the visual breadcrumbs when I started to compare the two, like a small reward for my detective skills. And yes, I'm pretty sure more people have made the connection. The book mentions evacuated British kids from a war ending up on a deserted island. The game features British kids in a war-torn environment on an island. Some kids in the book turn primal and worship a pig's head with flies, and refer to it as the Lord of the Flies. They also have a chief trying to rule over unruly subjects and hunt with spears. They turn on themselves and kill a kid who they mistake for a beast. The game presumably uses many visual references to this, not in the least the cult part of worship and what William Golding speculated would happen to kids on an island. They would turn to savagery.
Every time the other kids talk to the girl, she suddenly starts convulsing and the screen gets a red tint, possibly symbolizing that the girl is seeing red and starting to remember that the other kids killed her. Which is also supported by the fact that her first reaction in the intro was violence. They also show a sheep at the bottom of a well, convulsing and growing each time we see it. The girl then throws up the sheep, which then starts chasing the children, picking them up one by one. In Celtic folklore, the rabbit is seen as an omen of death, which is why the children sacrifice the girl in hopes of stopping the war, but might have ended the world instead. The story of Little Nightmares 3 sadly doesn't really live up to either its predecessors or Reanimal. Like we mentioned before, the world building seems more like they threw things that are scary or creepy together without thinking about how they actually fit into the world itself. Both the first 2 Little Nightmares and Reanimal feel more cohesive in their world building, both when it comes to monsters and the environment. The janitor in the first game protects the people of the mall from runaway kids. The hunter in the second game, well, hunts. Everything feels like it belongs in the game world. The same can't really be said about Little Nightmares 3. The baby boss acts, well, like a baby, distracted and grabbing whatever is nearest. It changes intentions with chases that end in finding a rattle or using its Medusa eye, turning everyone into stone. But sometimes it has normal eyes and lets you go off as indifferent. All you really have to do is hide until the danger passes. And the payoff with the crows are that they help you distract the already easily distracted baby. Now, Supermassive games are by no means a bad developer when it comes to horror. They've made some really great narrative-driven games that people love. But the Tarsier formula was something new for them, and unfortunately, I think they didn't really have the understanding of it to pull it off. The big twist of the game is that Alone never actually existed. She's just Los's doll. It's not really a bad twist by any means, but the ending does leave quite a lot to be desired.
To understand the games better, we did a visual comparison for the themes of the games. Cohesion in environments is really important, even in a fantastically bizarre world like Little Nightmares. The first one has a central theme of gluttony and hunger. It's based on the Maw, a big cruise ship of sorts, that invites passengers to eat all night long. The environments include air vents, a pantry, a library, kitchen, diner, and then the cabin of the lady. The visuals echo the theme. The small hungry child in the lower areas of the Maw sharing their food, while the pantry is overflowing with food for the guests. The kitchen is stacked high with plates, indicating a lot of food being eaten. The mount also requires 2 people to work on the food, while the janitor looks out for runaway children and intruders on the ship. 6 also experiences hunger, but of a different kind. She's learning that she can feed off the guests' souls, since normal food isn't helping her. The yellow color of 6's raincoat is also red herring, as well as a good contrast color. Most of the scarier areas are bluer in hues, and 6 stands out as a ray of light. Yellow is a friendly color, always highlighted with her lighter illuminating her. The environment continues its visual exposé on greed. There are lots of shoes, books, crates and boxes, while clearly indicating that the children don't get much, and the lady running the ship doesn't care to acknowledge it, destroying mirrors as she goes, to keep from seeing the monster she is. Little Nightmares 2 creates an equally believable world. The woods are the eerie outcrops of the big city where the televisions are everywhere. The theme of the game is loneliness and escapism. The TVs literally suck you in, with hints of it at the beginning of the city. Loose clothes draped over chairs, next to a bunch of TVs that are broken. As they progress further into the city, the people appear, compelled to keep watching any screen that turns on. Everyone is busy being glued to a screen, while others escape the loneliness by creating people. The teacher is busy schooling kids made of porcelain, and the doctor creates mannequins with dead people. The closer you get to the TV signal tower, the stronger it gets, until the thin man walks out and grabs 6, prompting Mono to save her in the tower. The visual clues of having chairs everywhere are also breadcrumbs for the hate Mono has towards chairs, but in the future, when he becomes the thin man, stuck in an endless loop of trying to capture 6 before she betrays him. Little Nightmares 3 has us starting in a deserted and dead town called the Necropolis. It's abandoned to a giant creepy doll. The only clue to your arrival is a broken mirror, which you find out is the way you're traversing the world. The theme is not easy to decipher, the closest being loneliness and friendship, although it isn't shown in the game to a full extent. The next traveling mirror leads you to a candy factory, with a Spider-Woman supervisor. There's surveillance, workers hanging on meat hooks working on candy. Nothing really connects Necropolis to the factory either. The next mirror leads to nondescript wooden rooms with puppetry. The scenery changes when you go outside and realize you're on a boat made of metal and wood, with a circus on the main deck. Visually, it's bizarre to show the whole circus as suddenly flying with the giant propellers until the end of the entire area. There's no build-up of scary heights and vistas. The last environment is an insane asylum that's overgrown and run by a psychiatrist. You find out that Alone is based on a doll and isn't real. Building up to the last mirror she can't traverse for unknown reasons. It's also unknown how Lo has these powers to traverse through mirrors and knows the right ones. A broken one doesn't work, but the next one will still lead him to the same place. The rules of traversal should have been more clear. Reanimal and their visuals and lighting is top tier. The darkness in the game is intentional, since you both have pretty decent light sources to work with, enhancing the feel for exploration. It's easier to direct attention with light as well. Be it the red light leading you in the game, as the red visions increase for the girl, like clues on the road from Hansel and Gretel. Breadcrumbs that will lead you to the truth. Red usually means danger, and Tarsier twists the meaning of it by making it the guiding light. Visually heading more into danger, but also the only way of finding out the truth. While the Little Nightmares games often revolve around survival and escaping, Reanimal adds a sense of discovery as well. The added range of camera pans and perspectives provides a sense of exploration that ties well with the theme of finding out what's going on this island. Instead of crawling in a million air vents, the traversal is often part of the puzzles. Instead of the first bad guy being confined by small rooms, he's able to traverse long distances and has decorated his part of the island to be his. Instead of only monsters attacking you, it's birds pecking at you along the shoreline, a whale that needs help to see again, and a lamb god emerging from the girl. The animals are twisted, and so too must the kids be.
Let's talk a little about the actual game mechanics and game design of the Little Nightmare series, as well as Reanimal. Mechanically, these games are quite simple, relying a lot on aesthetics and world building to draw the players in. The core mechanics of the games are tools for the player to navigate the world and solve puzzles, with some entries having very light combat mechanics. Grabbing is probably the most prominent system, since you use it for, grabbing things, such as shoes that you can throw, but it's also a part of the climbing system as well. In the first game, the swaying of the boat is also used for solving certain puzzles, which I think is a great way to integrate the logic of the world as a game mechanic. Little Nightmares is a great example of less is more in terms of game design, where it seems that most of the work, rightly so, went into level design and art, while making sure the players feel like a tiny child in a world full of monsters. Little Nightmares 2 polished the core mechanics and also added a second character that gives a little more depth to some of the levels, with Mono and Six having to help each other out in certain puzzles. This is also where they added the aforementioned combat mechanics, where the player can grab a wrench or a pipe in order to defeat the kids in the school level. These are heavy and appear far in between to make sure that it's never overused. The biggest addition is probably the TV power that Mono gets later in the game. It's a very cool mechanic that I think levels up the entire experience from the first game. It's not really a coincidence that, from what we can tell, Little Nightmares 2 is the most beloved entry in the series. Everything feels more polished, the level design and the puzzles have more depth, and it's exactly what a good sequel should be. That brings us to Little Nightmares 3. The same core mechanics are present here as well, but the level design took a big hit. Almost from the beginning of the game, Lo has a bow, while Alone has a wrench. This in and of itself is not a bad thing. A lot of games have a similar setup where the characters have weapons from the get-go. The main issue is rather that the puzzle design does virtually nothing with this concept. There are a lot of traversal and puzzle solving that boils down to Alone hitting something with a wrench and Lo shooting something with a bow. There aren't really a lot of creative ways that these mechanics are implemented. If we look at games such as It Takes Two or Split Fiction, where they follow the same principles of having each character have a distinct weapon or power. However, in those games the design feels more intentional and shaped around those weapons. I think one thing that could have elevated Little Nightmares 3 is if they had different weapons for each level, or at least having the current weapons evolve in some way to make sure that everything is not solved in the same way. Reanimal is very much a spiritual successor to Little Nightmares in terms of design. I know, big surprise. One of the biggest upgrades to design is the dynamic camera and vertical level design, bringing this game into full 3D rather than 2.5D. And for those that don't know what that is, it's essentially when a game is for the most part a side-scroller, but allows vertical movement to some extent. The actual camera design is still very similar to its predecessors, not following the character as a typical third-person game would, but being more of an onlooker from the sidelines. I think this is a very natural and clever evolution of the formula that makes the world feel bigger and scarier. The drivable boat, also a new addition, would not have worked as well as it does if they kept the game 2.5D. I think Reanimal gives the player a wider range of systems to interact with compared to previous entries, even if they are one-offs for specific levels. The big cannon and the tank are two such mechanics that we really enjoyed. The cannon is a very cool way to solve the puzzle of getting past the big ass bird in the water, and the tank lets the players go on a little rampage, shooting enemy soldiers and the giant sheep monster, before the inevitable happens. It really seems like Tarsier wants to push themselves when it comes to their game design in a way that Supermassive didn't really achieve, and that's why Little Nightmares 3 fell rather short and Reanimal was critically praised.
These are some of our thoughts on these games. We wanted to compare Reanimal and Little Nightmares 3 to find out why one worked and the other didn't, but we couldn't talk about them without mentioning the first two games. Clearly, and maybe not surprisingly, the developer makes such a big difference in both design and art. Have you guys played Reanimal or Little Nightmares 3? And if so, what are your thoughts? Did you actually like what Supermassive did, or did it fall flat like it did for us? Let us know in the comments, and until next time,
See ya!